In this video, we'll be filling in the 2024 electoral map based on the newest poll conducted from every single state. Hundreds of new polls were conducted this week. We're going to go over all of them today and show you guys where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump stand on the path to 270 electoral votes. And so we're just going to get right into it, starting off on the West Coast in Washington, where Kamala Harris leads by 21%, according to the most recent poll conducted by Elway Research. This is a very small sampled poll, honestly not the most reliable pollster, but it's the newest one we have, and so Washington for now is going to be solid blue. However, the vice president is doing much worse in Oregon. She leads by just 5%, according to the only poll conducted between her and Donald Trump. This poll was conducted after Harris replaced Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. So Oregon is not even going to be likely blue. It is going to be a lean state on our map. And then down in California, this is Kamala Harris's home state. She served as its attorney general and as a senator from California for 4 years before becoming Joe Biden's vice president. And in the most recent poll, she leads by 24 points. Keep in mind, Joe Biden won the Golden State by nearly 30 in 2020. And so Colorado is going to be solid blue, but Harris is on track to perform significantly worse than the incumbent president. Next up in Nevada, we have one of the 7 competitive swing states. It's probably the least important one, though, as it only has 6 electoral votes. There's no realistic scenario where Harris or Trump need to win the silver state in order to win the election. But according to the latest poll, Kamala Harris leads by just 1%. Trump is probably going to take back the polling average here very soon. Nevada is going to vote red this time for the first time in 20 years. The last time a Republican won Nevada was George W. Bush back in 2004. Trump lost it by 2 points in 2016 and 2020, but this is a state that is consistently shifting more and more to the right every single year. We saw in 2022 the culmination of the GOP's efforts here with Joe Lombardo, a Republican, being elected as Nevada's governor. But for right now, Kamala Harris leads by 1 point in the most recent poll, so it is going to be tilt blue. Moving on to Arizona, this is actually going to be a hugely consequential state. It voted for Democrats in the last election. Biden won Arizona by 0.31%. It was the second closest state in the entire country. Only Georgia was slightly more competitive. It's pretty telling that Biden won Arizona in 2020, but today Kamala Harris is losing by a significant margin. In fact, according to the newest poll, which was conducted by the New York Times, Trump leads by a whopping 5 percentage points. This is well outside of the margin of error. If Trump can win Arizona by 5 points, there is no way that he is going to lose the election. In fact, Trump leads in 5 of the 6 most recent polls from Arizona, going all the way back to the end of August. There's only one poll where Kamala Harris isn't behind, and that's the one where she and Trump are tied. So Arizona is going to be a lean red state on our map. Trump is on track to perform much better than he did 4 years ago, and according to Polling Market, he has a 63% chance of winning Arizona. His odds in Arizona are higher than in every other swing state. Continuing on eastward to Colorado and New Mexico, we have 2 states that Biden won by a double-digit margin in the last election. Colorado by nearly 14 points, New Mexico by nearly 11. Today, Kamala Harris leads by just 10 in Colorado. This is a significant drop-off from where Democrats were 4 years ago, and this is a poll from Morning Consult which heavily leans to the left, which means in reality, Harris is probably going to do worse than what this poll says. And so right now, just according to the Pew data, Colorado is going to be likely blue, signaling a pretty big drop-off from where Democrats were 4 years ago. And then in New Mexico, we have Kamala Harris performing a subpar again, with her leading by just 8% in the most recent Survey USA poll. Her average is now less than 10, and so New Mexico is on track to being noticeably more competitive than it was in 2020, especially as Hispanic voters continue to move away from the Democratic Party and towards the right. Next up, in Texas, the Lone Star State was supposed to be very competitive in 2020. Polling said that it was a virtual tie between Biden and Trump, but in the end, Trump still came out with a pretty commanding victory. He won it by nearly 6 points today. That is where he's polling at, and considering just how much he's been underestimated in Texas in the past, Trump is probably going to win the state by 10 points this time around. But according to the pure polling numbers, Trump leads by 6% according to the most recent poll, just 1% shy of the 7-point solid state threshold. And so the Lone Star State is going to be lean red, but it'll go to Trump nonetheless and provide him with a hefty 40 electoral votes. And to finish off the western half of the US, we're going to fill in all of these rural states in the middle of the country here where Trump especially dominates. He's going to win Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except its 2nd district, as well as Kansas and Oklahoma, all by solid margins of 15 percentage points or more. The 2nd district of Nebraska is currently lean blue, Hawaii is safe blue, and Alaska is going to be solid for Donald Trump. Before we continue, 83% of you guys are not subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server to chat with me personally. Link in the description below. Moving on now to the Midwest, which is probably going to be the most consequential region in the entire country. Kamala Harris must win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all 3 of these states, not one less, even if she wins Nevada, if she wants to have any chance at getting to 270 electoral votes. And the bad news for her is that polling always underestimates Trump's support in these 3 states, and in 2016, that is why he was elected over Hillary Clinton. He won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all by less than 1%. Now, Joe Biden did win them back in 2020, but these were under very favorable conditions for Democrats. We had a recession, we had a pandemic that lasted a year before the election, and Joe Biden was probably the best person Democrats could have nominated 4 years ago. That is not the case with Kamala Harris. The only reason why she's the nominee was because she was chosen to be Biden's running mate in 2020. And so we're going to begin in the Midwest with Minnesota, which is Governor Tim Walz's home state. He's the incumbent governor, and he has recently become Kamala Harris's running mate. That's the only reason why Harris leads in Minnesota. If Joe Biden hadn't dropped out, Trump would probably be winning here. Even if Kamala Harris was the nominee but chose someone else to be her vice president, if it wasn't Walz, Republicans would probably be leading. Minnesota hasn't voted red since 1972, but it has shifted heavily to the right over just the past decade. But with Walz on the ticket with Harris, Harris currently holds a 5-point lead in the most recent poll, so it is going to be a lean blue state. Meanwhile, Iowa is going to be likely red. Illinois will probably be on the cusp of being likely to solid blue, but for right now, we're going to be nice to the Democrats and make it solid. And then Indiana is, of course, going to be safe red. Moving up to Wisconsin, though, this is going to be one of the closest states in the entire country. Walz is going to help Harris out here, but Wisconsin is generally the most conservative out of the 3 blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That is why Wisconsin is going to be particularly competitive this time around. It's probably going to vote slightly to the left of Pennsylvania, but Trump is still the favorite. According to the most recent poll, the former president holds a 1% lead. This is more than enough. In 2020, Joe Biden at this point was on track to win by 6.6%. Keep in mind, he won Wisconsin by 0.63. Now, in 2016, at this point in September, Hillary Clinton led by 4.7%. Eventually, she lost the state entirely. And so the fact that Trump leads in the most recent poll really is telling, because in 2020 and 2016, not a single poll had Trump winning in Wisconsin. And so today, the state is going to be tilt red, but in terms of what this actually means, it means a lot more than just a slight victory. Trump is probably going to win by at least 2 to 3 percentage points. And then in Michigan, out of all 7 of the swing states, it is the most liberal. It voted for Joe Biden by nearly 3 points in the last election. Today, Kamala Harris leads by 3% in the most recent poll. In the polling average, she's ahead by 1.8%, still much worse than where Clinton and Biden were in the last 2 elections, and you saw just how much polling overestimated the Democrats 4 and 8 years ago. And so Kamala Harris up by 1.8. This is no guarantee that she is going to win. I still have Trump winning Michigan, but according to just the numbers themselves, Kamala Harris is currently on track to win Michigan by a lean margin, according to the most recent poll. While in Ohio, the most recent poll has Trump up by a double-digit margin. Trump flipped Ohio back in 2016, won it again in 2020, and in 2024, there's no doubt he is going to carry the Buckeye State for a 3rd time in a row. And now to finish off the Midwest, in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State is probably going to be the most important in the entire country. It's the one that basically everyone is talking about. If Kamala Harris doesn't win Pennsylvania, she has no chance to get the presidency. And the good news for Trump right now is he is leading in Pennsylvania. In the most recent poll from Rasmussen Reports, we have a tie between the 2 nominees, but according to the second most recent poll, which we're going to use for the map, Trump leads by 1%. And you might say that Kamala Harris leads by basically nothing in the polling average, but she is still doing significantly worse than Biden in 2020 and Clinton in 2016. This is yet another example of Kamala Harris underperforming the last two Democratic nominees. And this is really a problem for the Harris campaign. If she cannot win Pennsylvania, she basically cannot win the election. Because if Pennsylvania goes red, Kamala Harris can win Michigan, Nevada, she can even win Wisconsin, which she is not currently on track to do. She can also hold on to Arizona, and without Pennsylvania, the math simply doesn't work out for her. She must win the Keystone State if she wants to have any realistic chance at becoming the 47th president. Moving on now to the Northeast, most of these states are going to be solid blue: Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Harris is going to win pretty easily, while New Jersey and Delaware are slightly more competitive. However, up in New York, we have another surprisingly competitive state, a state that Joe Biden carried by 23 points in the last election. Today, Kamala Harris's lead in the Empire State has dwindled down to just 13 points. Now, before, we had this one poll from Siena College from around 2 months ago that had Harris leading by 14%. We thought, oh, I mean, she's leading by just under 15. She might be able to win by a solid margin. But we have another poll, this one conducted by Siena College again, and it has Kamala Harris leading by 13. This isn't any better. In fact, it's worse, and it cements the fact that Kamala Harris is on track to perform the worst for any Democratic nominee since 1988 in New York. The last time that New York was not a solid blue state was when Michael Dukakis was the nominee running against George H.W. Bush nearly 40 years ago. And so New York right now is going to be likely blue, just like New Jersey and Delaware. Next up, we have a very flawed poll from New Hampshire conducted by the University of New Hampshire, which is, of course, based in the Granite State. They have Harris leading by 11 points. Joe Biden only won New Hampshire by 7 points. Kamala Harris is not going to win it by anything over a double-digit margin. This is completely ridiculous, but for the purposes of the map, New Hampshire is going to be likely blue as a result of this very flawed poll. The University of New Hampshire is also ruining the polling average in Maine. They released 2 polls. The most recent one had Harris up by 17. I mean, that is basically impossible. Joe Biden won Maine by 9 points, and that was much better than Hillary Clinton's performance from 2016 when she won the state by just 2.9. And so the UNH going from a 9-point lead to Harris to a 17-point lead for Harris 1 month later really shows you how flawed of a pollster they are. The most recent poll from Penn Atlantic has the vice president leading by 9 again. This is a little bit more realistic, but they're still definitely overestimating Democrats. But for right now, Maine is going to be likely blue based on the most recent poll, with the 1st district being solid and the 2nd district being likely red. Finishing up the map now, down south, most of these states are going to be very solid for Donald Trump. He's easily going to win in Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. This puts him basically neck and neck with Kamala Harris with only 4 states to go. We're going to start off in Virginia, where the election is getting especially close. The most recent poll has Harris leading by just 2%. In fact, before Joe Biden dropped out of the election, he was losing in the polling average to Donald Trump in Virginia. The state has taken a hard turn to the right over the last few years. That is why they elected a Republican governor in 2021, and Harris up by 2 in the most recent poll is abysmal for the Democrats. It places Virginia in the tilt blue column along with Nevada. Next up in North Carolina, the Tar Heel state is also going to be pretty close, with Donald Trump leading by 2% according to the most recent poll from the New York Times, which is a left-leaning pollster. Trump leads by 2 points according to the New York Times. That is a pretty big deal. And so in 2020, every single poll basically said that Joe Biden was going to carry the Tar Heel state. That is not the case anymore. Donald Trump is dominating here. It's the only swing state he captured in both 2016 and again in 2020 when he lost the Midwest and Georgia as well as Arizona. But North Carolina stuck with the former president and is going to do so for a 3rd time in a row. North Carolina is going to be lean red according to the most recent polls. Moving on to Georgia, this was the most competitive state in the 2020 election. It voted very narrowly in favor of Joe Biden. He won the Peach State by 0.24%. Democrats are not going to repeat their successes there this time around. Georgia is on track to go back into Trump's hands. In fact, just look at the 8 most recent polls. 6 of them have Trump leading, and 5 of them show Trump leading by 3 percentage points or more. Harris is done in Georgia. She should just pull out her campaign. In the last election, Trump led by just 1% in the polling average. Today, he leads by 2, and his lead is only starting to grow. And according to the most recent Rasmussen Reports poll, Trump leads by 3. We also had a new New York Times poll. They had the former president up by 4. So the peach state is clearly going to be lean red. And finally, in Florida, Donald Trump is on track to win the Sunshine State for a 3rd time in a row. In 2016, polling said Hillary Clinton was going to win the state. Trump won it by 1.2%. In 2020, the polls said Biden would win by an even larger margin. Then they said that Hillary Clinton was going to win Florida, but then Trump won by an even larger margin, winning the Sunshine State by 3.4%. Today, Trump is going to increase his vote share in Florida for his 3rd time in a row. He leads by 6 percentage points on average. Some of these polls even have him up by 10 points. He can probably win by somewhere around 7 to 10, but the most recent poll from the Hill and Emerson College has the former president up by 5, which is what we're going to have to use for this map. So the Sunshine State is going to be lean red as of right now, but still a victory and 30 electoral votes going into the Trump column. And so based on the newest poll conducted from every single state, Trump is in a very strong position to win the 2024 presidential election with 291 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 247. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates. Link in the description below.